Thank you again, Charlene, for being with us here today at KCC to present on work-life balance. And this is from an occupational
Ah,
therapy approach. So feel free to take it from here.
all right, of course. Um, all right. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this. I think it's super important. So this is work-life balance from an occupational therapy approach. And to just introduce myself really quickly, my name is Shirleen. I'm a soon to be second year student at the Ohio State Occupational Therapy Doctorate Program. I graduated from OSU in 2023 with a BS in biology. I'm really passionate about improving people's quality of life and learning what that might mean for each individual person. And I became interested in OT after learning about its holistic and patient centered approach. I got interested in KCC after attending the kinship family celebration last year, which was a lot of fun. Some fun facts about me: I'm of Kenyan heritage and I'm the oldest of four children. I love nature and reading. Okay, so this is the objective of this presentation. So my goal is to empower you guys with simple and meaningful strategies in order to promote occupational balance and live a less stress-inducing life. I'm gonna define what I mean by occupational balance here in a second. So to go through some of the things we'll be talking about for this session. So I got started with the introduction here, and I'm going to have three focus areas. So we're going to start off with self-care habits, and I'm going to talk about why we fall into ruts and what is behavioral activation. That's a huge topic in OT and how we can use that to our advantage when it comes to that. And then I'm going to be talking about change in environment, sort of how we can think about those two things um, to work with us rather than against us when we're trying to implement better habits. I'm going to explain why change is so difficult. For my third area of focus, I'm going to be talking about boundaries and communication. And I'm going to be explaining why establishing boundaries is a good thing, why it can be difficult to do so sometimes. So I'm excited to talk about all of that. So first, I'm going to start with the icebreaker for today. So number one, what do you guys like to do in your free time? For the next question, when was the last time you truly felt rested? I feel like it's that's more difficult to achieve. I feel like a lot of times when we should be resting, we're thinking about school or work or whatever obligations you have in life. So when was the time that you truly just had a chill moment? Okay, so for my last question here, do you think wellness, the way it's portrayed, like in society or like in the media, is realistic? Do you think it's like achievable in your own lives? Just out of curiosity. So it seems like a lot of us are aware of like the negative effects of stress and the kind of toll it can have on our bodies. I think for me, when I learned about that in school or wherever else, it kind of freaks me out because it's then I get even more stressed because I'm like, I shouldn't be stressed all the time. Um, but I think it's important to acknowledge, but at the same time, to focus on what we can do about it and just focus on like our locus of control. So that's what I'm going to be getting into in these next few slides. Thank you guys so much for those responses. Those were really insightful. So what is occupational balance? So according to the American Occupational Therapy Association, OTP4, occupational balance is contentment with one's health, self-esteem, sense of belonging, security, and opportunities for self-determination, meaning, roles, and helping others. And then it goes on to define well-being according to the World Health Organization's definition. So well-being is a general term encompassing the total universe of human life domains, including physical, mental, and social aspects that make up what can be called a good life. I really like this definition because I feel like it's pretty all-encompassing, and I like the fact that it mentions self-determination. I feel like that's a major pillar of wellness. And like I mentioned before, it's focusing on what you can control and maintaining that self agency in your own life. Um, Before I get into sort of like the nitty gritty of all these topics, I did want to like put this sort of like a disclaimer. So, the reality is well-being does not exist in a vacuum. And what I mean by this is that I feel like everyone is facing some sort of barriers or some sort of disadvantages that make wellness not as equally accessible as it should be. So I have this statistic here. 67% of family caregivers in the US report difficulty balancing their jobs with caregiving responsibilities. And some of those systemic barriers just in the US could include lack of community resources, lack of support, especially for minorities, disabled individuals, those of us that are neurodivergent. People are experiencing housing or food insecurity. And also, yeah, so my point of this presentation is to not give advice or preach about things as if everyone has equal access to the time, resources, and opportunities as everyone else. Really what my goal is, like I mentioned before, is to empower you with the ideas and knowledge. I feel like knowledge and education is just super, super important. To empower you with the idea that well-being is still possible wherever you are in life, and it's something that can meet you where you are, and it doesn't have to look like how it might look like for other people. So that's my disclaimer. Now to get into my first area of focus, self-care habits and implementing those self-care habits. So I'm going to be talking about, firstly, why we fall into ruts. And I'm going to be talking about behavioral activation, which is a major principle used in OT for treating those with depression. So do you find yourself falling into ruts? Why does it happen? So for me, the best way I've heard a rut be described is like this. Life is like a video game. It's constantly challenging you. And every time you meet those challenges, you gain experience or XP, and you're able to perform at a higher level. However, when you're depressed or burnt out, you're not able to take on those challenges in the same way you could before. And that's when you can lose some experience and find yourself at a lower level. And I feel like at this stage, this is also when we can become very self-critical because we expect ourselves to perform at the same level we were at before, when really we should just start with where we are. And I feel like societal pressures play a huge role in this. I feel like society can be discompassionate towards people in this stage or this phase of life, because everything is go, 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 and there's no periods of rest. There's no space for these periods of lower mental health. And that's why it's so important to start with where we are and start with the most simplest of tasks. This could even be like getting out of bed. Things that feel so minuscule that it almost feels ridiculous, because every time you do these actions, we're regaining experience and we're leveling up and we're building that mental and emotional resilience to get back to the level or stage or like level of higher performance we were at before, so that we can tackle all these challenges that life is continuing to throw at us. So, and this relates to behavioral activation. Behavioral activation is based on the principle that re-engaging in small, meaningful tasks improve mood and motivation over time. So the major principle behind this is that it focuses on doing before you feel ready, because action leads to improvement, not the other way around. And I feel like this is a simple idea, but it's really hard to implement. I've fallen into the trap before of waiting until I feel ready to do certain things in my life, when really you should do the action and then the mood or like the motivation will follow. Okay, so these are some activity ideas. Firstly, I think a cool thing to do is just sit down with a pen and paper or device, whatever works best for you, and just write down, what do you enjoy doing? We talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the presentation. Um, what do you enjoy doing, but also what are habits that you want to implement for yourself, or habits that you think are important to implement for yourself. So I'd love to hear some of your guys' responses for this. Yeah, I feel like that's a really good idea, a reward system. I feel like a good way to keep track of it is a habit tracker. Maybe some of you guys have seen this before. There's different ways to do it. So this one in white, I just got it off Pinterest, the healthy routine checklist. It has it divided by days of the week, and it has different activities on the side. So sleeps 7 to 9 hours, wake up on time, dental routine, just those like important healthy habits and self-care habits. You can just put a check mark next to it each day that you complete the habit. Um, I think a good way to do it, this one on notebook paper, is the habit tracker that I use. So this is one from like a few years ago. And I like this layout because it's super simple. At the top, I just have the activities I wanted to do. So G stands for gratitude, E for exercise, M for meditation. And then on the side here on the margin to the left, I have the date. So January 1st, January 2nd, so on and so forth. And each day I complete the task, I just put like a little check mark. And I feel like putting this, like any sort of habit tracker that you want to use, putting it on the fridge or putting it on your bedroom wall or the mirror, it's a really good way to build up momentum. And especially if you are stuck in a rut, or you just have, you're just not confident in your ability to take on these healthier routines. It's sort of like every day you're looking at evidence to the contrary. You're giving yourself more and more proof that you're on the right track, and you're completing what is important to you each day. I also like it because you can just come up with 3 simple things to complete. It maybe takes you 5 minutes total to complete first thing in the morning. And this is a good way to build momentum, and it's also a good way to promote self-care, because you know that before you go and take care of everyone you need to take care of and all of your obligations in the day, you know that you've already filled up your cup for the day. And so I feel like that's something that can give you a better outlook on life. So yeah, I also chose gratitude, meditation, 5 minute stretch, those sort of things, because these are habits that have been scientifically proven. There's evidence-based research on these activities that they boost your mental health. So by doing these tasks, you can start at a lower level. You can start at just writing 3 things you're grateful for, or just stretching for 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be like this long, blown out session. But by starting small, you're able to boost your mood and then increase your capacity to do those healthier habits. I feel like it's something that's easy to snowball, so that when you first wake up in the morning, you know you've made the healthy decision. So it's easier for you to make healthier decisions throughout the day, which again boosts your mood. And like I mentioned, life can be challenging as it is, and it becomes so much easier when you're in the right headspace to take on those challenges. So that's why I think this is super important. So for another activity idea, I can also send this out, but this is a self-care menu. You could use this one. You could create your own of some of your favorite activities. And to make it even easier, you can just choose one thing to do before bed. Just set a timer, and complete it for yourself. So on this list, we have drink a glass of water for 5 minutes, step outside for some fresh air, 15 minutes, write in a journal, 20 minutes, light a candle, 1 minute. And of course, it doesn't have to be these times. You can do whatever's comfortable for you. But I like this because it shows that it doesn't have to take super long for you to do something for yourself. Even if it's 1 minute, that's still 1 minute that would have otherwise not been there. So I feel like it's a good thing to do. Are there any tasks from this list that you guys see yourself doing, like in your daily life? Yeah, I feel like it's very easy to get lost in other people, get lost in our roles in our lives, even though that they're super important, I'm sure very fulfilling for you guys. Um, but we also have to take care of ourselves because it's kind of like that plain analogy. You can't help anyone until you put the oxygen mask on yourself. So I think it's an easy concept, but not always easy to implement. I also appreciate that some of you guys mentioned that on this self-care menu list that you already are doing some of the things on this list. I feel like one of the hardest things about implementing healthier habits is falling into self-criticism, feeling like we already aren't meeting those expectations or our lives aren't looking exactly how we want it. But right now, as right now as we're living, I feel like we're already doing some of those habits. We're already doing some of those self-care things. It just might not be as much as we'd like. Um, but yeah, like as we mentioned, when you implement more positivity in your own life, you're able to put more of that out. So it's super important. Okay, so for my second area of focus, we're going to be talking about change and environment. So let's say you're trying to implement these new habits and routines, but you keep facing roadblocks. Why is it so difficult to change? I think a major factor is self-control. And also feel free to ask questions about this, guys. And it's I feel like it's kind of convoluted when you first hear it. But this quote is from this book that I really like called The Switch: How to Change When Things Are Hard. So in it, the author says, self-control is an exhaustible resource. When we talk about self-control, we don't mean the narrow sense of the word, as in the willpower to as in the willpower needed to fight a vice. We are talking about a broader kind of self-supervision. The research shows that we burn up self-control in a wide variety of situations, including managing others, coping with fears, controlling spending, etc. And when people exhaust their self-control, they're exhausting precisely the mental muscles needed to make a big change. So this kind of goes into how the mind works, how the brain works. It's a little bit more complicated than this, but I feel like the brain can act, or he mentions in the book that the brain can act in two modes. Um, when things are automatic and when things require self-supervision. And in that mode, we're acting our self-control. So when things are automatic, that could be like driving. That could be like waking up and creating the same breakfast that you create every single day. Um, so whenever we're being automatic, it's whenever we're doing things that are routine and regimented, and all of these tasks require less brain power because we can kind of go into autopilot mode. And we end up not exhausting our self-control as much. On the other hand, things that require self-supervision include trying new things, maybe learning a new dance or learning a new recipe. It includes things that scare us or make us nervous, like maybe talking to our boss, maybe, dealing with some things that come up like a new bill or something happening with the person you're taking care of, dealing with things that are unexpected. When we are enacting self-supervision, it's when we're dealing with things that require more intention. And whenever we do this, we're exhausting our self-control because it requires more presence, like I mentioned, intention to carry out these things. So we exhaust our self-control. Does that make sense? Is there any questions about that?
We did have a comment from Jenny. I like your frame of this as increasing positivity rather than self-care. I've thought of self-care as indulgent for myself.
Oh, that's yeah. I've definitely felt that way before too.
Welcome, Scott, too. Thanks for joining.
I also really like the author's definition of self-control because, like I said, when we think of self-control, we might think of, oh, I'm not gonna do this and like willpower. But self-control is also those decisions that you have to make every single day. Self-control happens when you're dealing with poor mental health. You're dealing with fears and worries because every single time the thought comes up, you have to fight it and make the decision to behave otherwise. And so that can really exhaust your self-control. And like I mentioned, you need self-control to implement new habits. So when you're already dealing with like sort of like the general life stressors, you exhaust that mental energy. So the author goes on to say, when you hear people say that change is hard because people are lazy or resistant, that's just flat out wrong. Change is hard because people wear themselves out. Um, so I really like this definition because it kind of combats some of the self-criticism that we might have, thinking that we're lazy or just that something's wrong with us that we can't implement these habits, when really we're up against a lot when it comes to life and how our mind works. I also have this statistic here. The brain is 2% of a human being's body weight, yet accounts for 20% of the body's total energy expenditure. So the brain uses up a lot of our energy, just thinking through things, making decisions every single day, can be a huge energy expenditure. So bottom line, if your life is more demanding, or if you are already dealing with things that use up a lot of your mental energy, this makes change more difficult. This is why I believe that step number one of any goal is improving mental health. Occupational therapists use strategies of energy conservation so that with this freed up energy, you can use it towards the goals that are meaningful for you. So I feel like when it comes to mental health, you have two choices. You can either remove the stressful things from your life, or you can add positive things to your life and increase your threshold for stress and build that emotional resilience. I feel like I would choose the latter because it's not realistic to remove certain aspects of our lives. We can't exactly like buy a plane ticket and like escape everything or leave a job or leave a certain circumstance. But if we start small, I feel like we can make a huge change. Just like one thing that could use a lot of your mental energy is just scrolling on social media. You might see something that you don't like, or you might see something that angers you, and that's already using up a lot of your mental energy, when I'm sure a lot of us would rather use that towards things that are meaningful for us. Okay, before I move on to the activity ideas, is there any questions about that?
I just want to say I love how you reframe things with these slides. Like, we do need energy to make change. And if we don't have that in our reserve, like, that's why change is hard. Like you said, it's not
Ex-
like we're being
yeah,
lazy or unmotivated, but like that is something that needs its own energy. So I do really appreciate you pointing that out. And that was like a aha moment to me.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I like how you summarize that too. I feel like it can sound kind of complicated, but yeah, basically, you need energy to make change. So, and like I mentioned before, it's difficult to remove some of the stressful things or some of the things that might drain our mental energy. But at the same time, I feel like we could stand to be more protective of our energy and realize, like the author said, that it is an exhaustible resource throughout the day. Um, I feel like that's why at the end of the day, it's easier to indulge and like maybe go into some of those habits that we don't want to do because you've already used up all your self-control and throughout the day, and you're sort of like in this state of decision fatigue.
Yeah, has anyone like after a long day, you can just feel it in your head, almost like I have no space left. All I can do is sit on the couch and maybe put the TV on, but literally I have no space left. I've felt those ways And that's when I know, like, okay, I maybe worked a little bit too hard today.
Yeah. I feel like it can, like, all those decisions you're making in a day, the stress of it can really take a toll. And I feel like, at least for me, it takes me a couple of days to recover from it. So it's super important to keep in mind. Okay, so for my first activity idea is to make habits automatic. I feel like this is a pretty common one, but I still wanted to mention it. Front loading tasks. So meal prepping at the beginning of the week, prepping clothes at the beginning of the week, doing things the night before. Um, and this is important because it can reduce decision fatigue and it can reduce overwhelm, especially starting in the day. Each thing that you prepare the day before is just one less thing that you have to decide on the day of. So I think that's super important. Um, you could also stack habits. So I have this infographic here that I feel like summarizes it pretty well. I can also send this out. But it starts with identifying existing habits, determine your goal, choose an anchor habit, select a new habit to stack, start small, and build momentum. So, for example, if every morning you know you're going to make a cup of coffee, maybe stand outside or like take a seat outside and drink your coffee while taking in the sunlight. Taking in sunlight first thing in the morning is a really easy way to boost your mental health and kind of like set your circadian rhythm. So that could be like a pretty easy habit to stack right there. Um, can anyone think of like other habits that you could stack?
I listen to a podcast on long drives.
That's a good one. Yeah.
I'm walking right now while listening to this meeting.
Mhm.
Anyone else have coffee be the thing that gets them out of bed?
I feel like a reward system in that way is a good way. Like if you have trouble getting up early, if you know you're gonna have a really nice cup of coffee, that could be the thing to anchor onto. Also, if you're trying to implement a fitness routine, if you know that, like for me, having like I create playlists like on Spotify, like knowing that I'm gonna be able to listen to my favorite song just motivates me to go out there and do my fitness, take a walk, whatever it is. So okay, another thing that you could implement is creating designated zones and boundaries, like in your own environment. For example, after 6 p.m., make a promise to yourself that you won't look at your work email. You could also just put your phone on do not disturb, or you can change the settings so that only certain people are able to call you, close family and friends. So that could be a good way to clear up some of that mental load. Another major thing is sleep hygiene. So making sure your bedroom is an environment of only sleep and leisure. I think someone mentioned that like having difficulty sleeping at night, when you should be sleeping, you're like thinking about what's next, what's coming up in the morning. I think this is something that a lot of us struggle with, myself included. But I feel like something that's helped me a lot, especially these past few years, is for me, I try not to lay in my bed during the day. I only lay in bed at night. You can still lay down like on the couch or like on a yoga mat, but just try to keep away from the bed unless it's nighttime, unless you're trying to go to sleep, to really tie into your brain that the bed is for sleep and relaxation, that sort of thing. You could also implement moments of presence. Like we mentioned, drinking a cup of coffee. For instance, breakfast time is designated time for you. A really good way, and I feel like a really accessible way to combat stress is to try to be mindful, try to have presence. And you can even do this like randomly if you're like sitting down outside or in your house, try to try to really take in where you are in the moment. What do you hear around you? What do you see around you? What do you feel? How does the floor feel beneath your feet? Um, I feel like one of the requirements for stress is to be somewhere where your body isn't. So when you're in bed, you're at work. And that strain on your mind of trying to be at two places at once is what creates that strain and that stress. So trying to just be mindful and present helps a lot. Even if you're like completing a chore, like washing dishes, like for me, I try to like remind myself, if I'm washing dishes, this is the only thing I have to do right now. Like this is the only obligation I have right now. It's whatever I'm doing in the moment. So I think it's super important. Yeah. Does anyone have any like boundaries or like environmental things that they would see themselves implementing like in your own life?
I might consider moving my office into a different room instead of having it in my bedroom, but I also don't think that necessarily has an effect on me for sleep in any manner.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's definitely different for every person. Like I'm in my bedroom right now. I have my desk in my room. It's not always feasible to um create these boundaries in your environment. But like I said, for me, I just try to keep it contained to my bed. So even if I can't like block out my entire room, I can at least section off my bed.
Right. No, totally get that. I mean, for me,
Mhm.
my bed is my bed and my desk is my desk, and never the two shall meet.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Uh, just a tip. I don't know how it is on Androids, but on iPhones, you can like set your bedtime on your phone and then it will automatically go on sleep. It will send you a reminder and go on sleep mode like 30 minutes before you go to bed. So you don't get notifications. And that's something that helps me because for me, I know if it's like gonna ding my phone, I'm gonna look at it. So I've just left that setting on and I'm like, oh, it's kind of nice. Like I don't have to worry about things on the phone right before I go to bed. That could keep me awake. So if anyone has a iPhone, I'm sure there's Android settings too, but I've liked that setting a lot.
Okay. So for another activity idea to sort of like or keep track of our energy expenditure, like I've mentioned before, is energy mapping. So everyone is different. Track when you feel the most energetic or lethargic, or just take a mental note when you do. And it doesn't have to look exactly like this one, but just you create like a simple graph on a piece of paper. On the y-axis, you have the energy level, and then on the x-axis, you have the time of day. And so maybe between the morning and the afternoon, you have a peak in your energy, and this is when you have the most ability to take on those tasks, those challenges. And then maybe between the afternoon and night, that's when you have lower energy. That's when you just want to rest and relax. I think it's important to know how things feel for yourself, so that you don't put the pressure on yourself to be like other people. So like for example, you don't have to be a morning person just because everyone else is. If you do your best work before the night, then you can adjust your schedule to that. And like I said, there's some things we can't change in our schedule, but just as much as you can. You can also use this to plan things when you're the most mentally ready to take them on. So I feel like it's super important for that as well. And are there any final questions or comments about maintaining mental energy, implementing habits, or changing environment in general? Yeah, I mean, like I said, I really like that you brought up that point because I feel like we're all different. Some of us like to be super hands-on, and that's just our personality. That's just the way our mind works. But it can, like you mentioned, it can get to be a lot, especially if you end up having all these tasks that you have to do yourself throughout the day. And it can make it difficult to have a moment for yourself. I feel like this is something that I'm still learning as a grad student, trying to understand how much can I have on my plate and what because at the end of the day, like, we're human, we can't do everything, even though we might want to, like, as much as we want to. I think like a good way to do it is to figure out what's super important to you, like what are your priorities, and create a separate list for that, and then another list of just like extra things that you hope to do, but if you don't complete it, it's okay. That way, at the very least, when you go to bed at night, you're satisfied knowing that you did what was the most important. So at least you don't feel like you're behind or anything like that, because that can just create extra stress. Okay, for my third and last topic, today we're going to be talking about boundaries and communication. This is something that's very near and dear to me, something that I'm still trying to work on in myself. So I'm excited to talk about this. So oftentimes we struggle with establishing boundaries because we've been conditioned. I feel like, in my opinion, especially if you're a woman or in a caretaking role, that establishing boundaries is an unkind thing to do. However, a lack of boundaries often leads to people pleasing, which is a hidden attempt to control. I feel like it's not as obvious, but it is a way to control or try to control outcomes and people's emotions, whether that is trying to control whether or not they're happy with us, or trying to control if they see us in a certain light. So I really like this quote by Melody Beattie. When we attempt to control people and things that we have no business controlling, we ourselves are controlled. We forfeit our power to think, feel, and act in accordance with our best interests. It blocks other people's ability to grow, and it stops events from happening naturally. It prevents me from enjoying people or events. And I really like this quote because it emphasizes how having lack of boundaries, people pleasing, trying to control things can suck a lot of the joy out of life, and it can cause us to be like very rigid. So the bottom line is a lack of boundaries leads to resentment. If we truly want to do right by people, we must learn to clearly communicate our needs and boundaries. This way, everyone, yourself and others, can have their own self-agency. I think it's really important to recognize that other people are separate from you, and that their emotions are their emotions. And if they get angry or get upset or they don't like the way you do a certain thing, they're allowed to feel that way. And by stepping back and recognizing that that's something that you have no control over, you're allowing them to have their own self-agency. And I feel like it's a form of not only self-respect, but a way of respecting them. So in occupational therapy, this is called supporting role balance. With this, we choose to use our energy based on what aligns with our meaningful roles. And so we're able to do things not out of guilt, obligation, or fear, but what truly aligns with our values. Before I move on, is there any questions or comments about that? A quick activity idea is what's mine, what's not. You can create like this T-chart. So on the left, you have my responsibility, not my responsibility. So I'm just for sake of time, I'm going to answer this myself. So what are the tasks and responsibilities that take up the majority of your energy? What is in your control? So for me, what's in my responsibility is my health, my assignments for school, my making sure that I get to work on time, that sort of thing. What's not my responsibility is what's going on with my brother, his assignments, or my mom, her work ethic, like things that are their responsibility, and I have to focus on what's within my locus of control. So for boundaries, this is just a list of healthy boundaries versus unhealthy boundaries. I did mention that there's like a negative connotation with boundaries, but we could stand to just identify the difference between what's a healthy boundary and an unhealthy boundary. So healthy boundaries include mutual respect for personal values, needs, and limits, comfort in saying no and accepting when others do the same, maintaining self-worth without external validation. Unhealthy boundaries include disregard for personal and others' values and limits, and ability to say no or accept it from others. So lastly for today, I have some of these case scenarios. I'm hoping that we can get through at least one or two of them. So you're a caregiver who just got the kids to bed. You're exhausted, but your cousin calls and asks you to watch your children last minute because she wants to go out. You've had a long week and we're planning to rest tonight. What do you do? A, say yes and push through even though you're exhausted. B, say no, explain you're tired and offer to help another day. Or C, ignore the call and hope she doesn't follow up. So you
Oh,
guys
that's so
go
good.
ahead.
Yes, please share. I know I had a gut reaction, but then I'm like, no, this is what I should actually do. So you could share one or both of those.
Okay, I like those responses. Let's see what the answer is. So B, say no, explain you're tired. So this, for this scenario, is the best answer because you're able to be honest with others, but at the same time, you're respectful of your own time. But I do like your guys' responses. I think it depends on your life, how you have things set up. I feel like ignoring the call and hope she doesn't follow up. It depends on what kind of relationship you have with your family. But I feel like I can see how that could be like a fair response too. And it at the same time, you still are setting the boundaries. I feel like A would be like the least healthy response for setting boundaries. But I also want to mention that I feel like another aspect of setting boundaries is how well you know people, and also can be nonverbal things as well, your tone, maybe the kind of culture that surrounds you. So I feel like that's something that you might not see on paper, but
Thank you.
okay. So for this next one, your teenage niece is upset that you won't buy her the new phone she wants. She says, you just don't care about me. How do you respond? Apologize and buy the phone without conflict. Get defensive and argue that you're doing your best. Stay calm, affirm your feelings, and explain your decision with empathy.
See. Yes.
Okay. So the correct answer is C. I think this is the best response because it allows you to hold space for others while, like it said, explaining your decision with empathy. I feel like B would just create like unnecessary conflict. And A, like I said, A is just you're kind of violating your own boundaries. Yeah, thank you guys so much for this. This is my first time doing something like this outside of school. So I was kind of nervous, but this was so great. I learned so much from you. I want to thank Angela and KCC for allowing me to present, and I want to thank everyone in attendance of my presentation. And then these are just my references.
Shirleen, I have to say, I'm so impressed. I can't believe you're still a student because you're ready to go out there already. And like all of the strategies and tips were right on target. So thank you for all the time you put into this. And we would love to have you back in the future too.
I'd love to. Thank you. I'm like I said, I'm super passionate about this. So it's like I've already read these topics in books. So when I was putting a presentation together, I was like, oh, and I know this, I know this. So it was a lot of fun.